So now we're going to do, and honestly, guys, it's just our opinion.
Yes.
It is just our opinion. We're going to review how the US media covered the Las Vegas NRL games and how the US reacted.
Yes. So, John, I'm not sure if you saw the news, but there was overtime in a college basketball game resulted in the screening of the NRL doubleheader being delayed in America. They had to move it to Fox Sports 2. It was meant to be on Fox Sports 1 in the US. But, yeah, that college basketball game ran overtime. It was meant to be on the network's primary channel, Fox Sports 1. But the game between Xavier and Georgetown went beyond 9:30 p.m. Eastern time in America. That meant a delay, although at least they put it on Fox Sports 2, John, until that game finished. So the main channel didn't join the action until 18 minutes in. That was just in time to see Jason Saab streaking down the touchline. As I said before, Lachlan Ilias making that brilliant ankle tap on him, John.
Yeah, it was like, that's fair. Like, there's a massive amount of gambling money in basketball and all college level things, and that happens here. I've contacted KO before because UFC Fight Night was supposed to start, and it didn't because, like, some car racing or something had gone longer than it was meant to be. That happens. It's just something that happens. At least in America, or in this case, they were able to bump it to another channel until the game finished. For me, I got nothing. That was what KO said. You'll just have to wait. That was it. Like, you just have to wait. It was an ESPN thing, you know, because KO has the rights to stream ESPN and UFC.
That's an issue. You got KO and you don't see the game until 18 minutes in.
And so, like, I was like, I actually had people at my house to watch it. And we're sitting there watching car racing with no other option. And that was why I subscribed to UFC Fight Pass. So I can understand. At least they had a way to cut it over. They were never going to care about rugby league more than they cared about even college basketball. They just
of course.
So
of course, yeah, but the NRL would have been filthy that occurred, John. I mean, it happened to go into overtime and they got delayed 18 minutes on the main channel. They just would have thought, oh, that's just our luck to have a college basketball game go into overtime. I mean, overtime in basketball games, it doesn't happen very often, John. I mean, for a basketball game to end in a draw, it's very rare. I mean, it's a lot more likely for, you know, a baseball game to go into... It's a lot more likely for a baseball game for the score to be level after the 9 innings than for a basketball game to be level at the end of the game. So they would have thought, look, just our luck on that one, John. But anyway, John, I had a bit of a look... I sort of looked around a bit on some, you know, US websites. I looked on the American Fox Sports website. I couldn't see any reports on there. I looked on Las Vegas newspaper websites, John. I found one report. It was by a lady by the name of Madeline Carter in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. She did a 4-paragraph report on the game, John. I didn't find anything on the other Las Vegas newspaper websites. There was an article done in the New York Post, though, John, by Mark Canizzaro. And he opened his article by saying, "Okay, Aussies, I'm hooked." So that was some good press for the NRL, John. foxsports.com.au, the Australian Fox Sports website. They spoke to some Americans about the game, John. They spoke to a security guard there who said the NRL is, quote, way better than the NFL because, quote, it's faster and they work together, not individually. There was also a Brooklyn-based writer who decided to blog the game. John admitted that he didn't have much knowledge watching the sport, but he went on to compare it to human cockfighting. As Lachlan Kroger was left bloodied by a collision while Manly's Jackson Paulo also required treatment. His name was David Lengel, this writer. And he was quoted as saying, "Another player is bleeding. Is this normal? But they play on. Jesus," he said.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a bit of a look at the media coverage of the game, John. Obviously, Yeah, look, I'll be honest, John, there's a few articles on it, but I was sort of hoping for... I would have thought you would have got an article on the Fox Sports US website, given that, you know, given Lachlan Murdoch... I mean, Lachlan Murdoch was one celebrity who was in the crowd, John. They put the camera on him. But given that his clout, you know, obviously with Fox in America, I would have thought he would have been able to organise a bit more coverage on that US Fox Sports website as well, John.
Yeah, I think if they had any expectation of ever getting anything, then it's a massive failure. But I don't think anybody had any expectation. Anyone who knows American sports, you look at the Fox Sports Australia website, okay, and it covers like every sport, because Australia is like sport mad, and if the NFL, when the NFL did bring some teams here, I believe, to play some actual season games years ago, and it was all over Fox Sports and here and on the TV and covered everywhere, right? But America fully only cares about 3 games, man. Like, they just don't care about anything else, and they care deeply about it from high school level all the way up to the top grade. You can see footage and stuff like that of some high school NFL baseball and basketball games that have sold out stadiums, college ones and the top level, all the way through. I think like 5 or 6 articles is actually quite an achievement to break through that, to be honest. Because yeah, like American sports is, and you know, they have games every night. Like, they have sport every night in America, 7 days a week, and they have, you know, we have the 17 teams in the NRL, and they have they have multiple conferences, you know, like basically multiple competitions that all merge together in baseball for the World Series and things. There's so much sport, so many teams, so much to report, and no big media organisation is going to go, oh, just don't worry about that baseball match that's happening on the weekend and cover this weird rugby league thing that's happening, because they just don't have the time or the resources, because there is so much sport and so many teams and so many games, stuff like that. Basketball, they play like best of 7 and things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the Major League Baseball, John, the season consists of 162 games for each of the 30 teams.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. So
you've got games on every night there.
Yeah, every night.
And so you've got to try and break through that. And that's an established sport that Americans are rusted on with.
And then,
I've talked before about tennis as well, John. Even a sport like that's got a long history in America, they only care about the superstar American players like Serena Williams, or before her, or alongside her, like Andy Roddick, and before both of those players, you know, Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi. That if there's not an American doing really well in tennis, John, they don't even care about that, let alone a sport that they're completely unfamiliar with.
They fully don't. And that's one of the things as Americans tell me, like, they don't get a lot of sport, like, you know, in Australia, we have sports news, the sports news section in the on the radio, on the TV. So, like, you know, I'm driving to work this morning, and it's like Natasha Belling does the news, and then, you know, coming up next is sport, and they gave you the update of the 2 games, and then talked about like Ezra Mam, Spencer Leniu, all this kind of thing. I've had Americans tell me, like, in the sports section of news and stuff like that in most American places, like, they don't have time even for that stuff, so they don't get a lot of reports about sports stars and what happens in, like, off the field and stuff like that, because they've got to get through so many match updates and stuff like that, injury updates. Talk about the 160 games or whatever. Like, there's so many players on a baseball team, so many people are injured and all that kind of thing. So they just don't have time. And so to get the NRL in the New York Post is pretty good. But I just think it wasn't at any point the intention, really. Like, some people are conflating the whole thing about, they went there to go and break into this American market, and they're going to try and get 1% of the American market. But I don't think that was ever the intention. I think it's, like I said last week, it's solely about betting. As long as they can put, because there's heaps of money in esports and stuff like that. Like esports are pretty new. They broke in. There's heaps of gambling money in esports and things. They broke in because even though Australia is a bet mad nation, per capita we bet more money per person than any other country in the world. There's way, way, way more betting revenue on a much wider variety of stuff in America. And they have limited limited states where gambling is legal. And then there's some federal thing going on where they're going to unlock it for every state, but then each state can say, oh, but we're still not unlocking it. But that would mean that you can gamble on out-of-state things or something. I don't really know. I don't care about American politics enough to to know the ins and outs of the whole thing. But it's solely, it's so coincidental when all this is happening, and in Australia we're trying to restrict gambling in sports, that suddenly NRL is going to America. AFL is never going to be able to go to America and try and break in because there's no AFL in America at all. There is 0 AFL teams in America. I'm making that up, but I'm taking a safe assumption. But we know, like at Utah, there's at least 4 rugby league teams, and America competed in the Rugby League World Cup and so on and so forth. So they don't need to break through and become a popular sport, and they don't need media coverage to do that. All they need to do is get on some bookmaker websites and start generating some revenue.
Yeah, so it's just about gaining enough familiarity to get Americans to bet on it, and earn revenue out of the gambling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of may as well merge this next topic with what we're talking about now, John. It really plays into what we're talking about now. Just if we've got any final thoughts on this Las Vegas experiment. Well, we've just touched on it. It's about the gambling. I just think if you were to really want to cut through one double header like once a year for 5 years, there's just not that. There's just no momentum with that. You do it once, you have 2 games, and then you disappear and come back to Australia, and then you're sort of forgotten about by the American public. There's just no momentum with that approach. They'll quickly forget the game and move on. I think that the US people, they're not really... I just don't think they're going to care about the Australian teams either. They're not going to have an attachment to Australian teams. Instead of thinking about buying the Super League in the UK, if they were serious about it, maybe they should try and look at, starting their own league in the US and putting the money that way. Start off with a Las Vegas team. Obviously, they've identified the Las Vegas as a market that they can, potentially gain some traction in. There's an opening there. I think they did think about LA, but the market's just too saturated in LA, so they've gone down the Las Vegas path. They could play in the big stadiums like Allegiant Stadium, outside of the NFL season. Work out potentially which other markets are the best markets for a rugby league team, markets that don't have, like Las Vegas, where there's an opportunity, and, start with a 4 or 6 team competition and grow it from there, John. Well,
I would think that they could do both. They should buy the Super League. And I think
if you can do both, great.
You're right. It's coming and dropping into Las Vegas and then flying out and then waiting till next year to go again is not gonna ever grow much. But all they really got to do is get on some bookmaker sites with some bet offers and stuff like that, and gamblers will follow the bet offers. So if they can do that and start generating revenue, then they can build more into the United States. I like the fact that they're going, and apparently the Roosters have already volunteered to go again next year. I think Craig Gower said, who's going next year? What's happening next year? That's what everybody really wants to know. We want some clarity about what's happening next year. My mate said to me yesterday, if they go on again next year, I'm going. That it's good for... Obviously, Vegas doesn't need the NRL to bring them tourism. I don't think they care about that little bit of pile of money. That it's not Taylor Swift bringing $140 million into New South Wales or anything like that. So it's a good experiment. I'll reserve full judgment until the next couple of years. I just like to see, like I said, they can get some American players to play in Australian Rugby League. That will be a thing that gets a little bit more interest, and getting that interest will generate more bet revenue. And that's all that really matters. I know a lot of people are anti-gambling revenue in sports, but I said last week, like, that money is what filters down to juniors. That's where the money for juniors comes, actually. Yeah. The TV deal is all well and good, but the majority of money in sports in most of the world is in gambling.
And that's the thing. We talked about it a podcast or two ago, John, that there are examples of people who have had real problems with gambling, but once you take the gambling revenue away, you'd be amazed how many people lose their jobs.
Yeah.
So for every action, there's a reaction. You got to be very careful when you make seemingly, bold moral statements like saying, "Oh, no more gambling, no more gambling." Well, hang on, there'd be some sort of a flow-on effect to
That's a massive issue. One of the things I thought was like really funny yesterday was Manly running around with the PointsBet as their major jersey sponsor. PointsBet
collapsed in America.
Yeah. They lost $30 million or something trying to open in America. Like, I thought it was, but that's just because there is like a actual mafia type thing in America with betting. You can't get in there. It's really hard to break in as an organisation as a bookmaker, not as a sporting organisation. Like I said, esports is massive. There's massive amounts of money that goes on esports. Massive amounts.
Yeah. One other thing I was just going to add, John, before we wrap up our Vegas chat was. Obviously those hopes that, Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce and Patrick Mahomes would be there. Obviously they didn't eventuate, John, unfortunately. So, unfortunately on that front, we got to point it out, the celebrity presence that was hoped didn't eventuate there, John. It's unfortunate.
They should correct that for next year. That's like what the NRL will now do is they'll sit down and they'll conduct a review. But that's what you have to do. It's not a stupid, useless review that you do. Where did we go wrong?
It's a new thing.
What did we do right? Yeah. What can we do to make it even bigger and better next year? And one of the things they should highlight is let's get some celebrities on board, celebrity endorsements on board. Actually,
if you have to pay them to go,
pay the celebrities to endorse. There's like some payment app in America that was featured on the Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and the rumor was they paid $20 million to be on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and then became super popular. That's how America works.
So that's the thing. What was it? $700 million in revenue they announced, I believe. Philandes announced that.
And $60 million profit.
Surely you can, or if all you got to do is pay people to go, surely they got the money to do that, John.
Exactly.
They should have looked at paying, a Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes to be there in the stands. Even some other celebrities, John, just to drum up some interest.
They could have done. One of the things that I thought would have been good was would have been a musical act between the two games, like a Super Bowl halftime show. They could have done something like that as well.
That's another point to make, John. I would have had. I think there needed to be more of a break between the two games. Give it a half hour or 45 minutes between the games to have an entertainment act.
In America, Americans will stay there forever. They watch the Super Bowl for 8 hours.
Exactly.
They'll stay there forever.
Yeah, I mean, as rusted on league fans as we are, John, I think we just, watching the two games back to back like that, it's a lot of footy to watch in a short amount of time. I think it would have been nice to have that sort of 45-minute interval between the games.
Get Beyonce to play or something, That's the thing. They could do
if you pay people enough money, they'll do anything.
Yeah, and then that way you will get more growth.